The late-night drive is a classic narrative device used in horror, psychological thrillers, and noir fiction to create tension, isolation, and existential dread. It plays on universal fears, being alone in the dark, the unknown lurking just beyond the headlights, and the unsettling feeling that something is wrong even when everything appears normal. Atmosphere and setting. The story thrives on its atmosphere. A deserted road at night is inherently eerie because it removes the safety of civilization. The limited visibility, the hypnotic hum of the engine, and the occasional flicker of distant headlights all contribute to a sense of vulnerability. The protagonist is cut off from help, making every shadow, every unexplained sound, a potential threat. Psychological tension. Unlike action-heavy horror, the late-night drive often relies on psychological unease rather than overt scares. The protagonist may start questioning their own sanity. Did I see something? Was that always there? The emptiness of the road mirrors the character's internal void, whether it's guilt, grief, or repressed trauma. The car itself becomes a moving prison, trapping the driver with their thoughts, or something worse. The supernatural versus the mind. Many stories in this vein blur the line between reality and hallucination. Is there truly a ghost, a monster, or a killer on the road? Or is the protagonist unraveling due to exhaustion, guilt, or something darker? The empty passenger seat, the figure in the rearview mirror that disappears. These elements force the audience to wonder, is this real, or is the character losing their grip? The twist, memory and trauma. Often, the late-night drive leads to a revelation, a repressed memory, an unseen accident, or a death the protagonist refuses to acknowledge. The empty passenger seat might symbolize a lost loved one, a hitchhiker who was never really there, or even the protagonist's own impending death, as in some vanishing hitchhiker tales. The journey becomes a metaphor for facing the past, with the road serving as a liminal space between life and death. Why it works. This type of story taps into primal fears, being watched, being followed, realizing too late that you were never alone. The confined space of the car amplifies claustrophobia, while the endless road creates a purgatory-like dread. Whether the threat is supernatural or psychological, the late-night drive leaves the audience haunted, questioning what was real and what was imagined. Long after the engine stops running, there's a moment in certain stories, often quiet, often creeping, when a character senses something deeply wrong, even if nothing visibly is. This is the essence of the strange feeling, a narrative archetype that thrives on the slow unraveling of reality, the weight of unseen presences, and the horror of knowing just enough to fear what might come next. It's not about jump scares or monsters in plain sight. It's about the sinking realization that the world is not as it should be, and that something, perhaps something that was always there, is waiting to be noticed. The anatomy of dread. At its core, the strange feeling is a story of mounting unease. It begins with something small, a flicker of movement in a mirror, a whisper just beyond hearing, a door left slightly ajar when it should be closed. The protagonist brushes it off, just my imagination, but the feeling lingers, sticky and persistent. The environment itself becomes suspect. A home feels less like a shelter and more like a silent observer. A familiar street at dusk seems subtly distorted, as if viewed through warped glass. The laws of reality haven't broken yet, but they've begun to fray. With the unseen presence. What makes this type of story so unsettling is its refusal to fully reveal itself. Unlike traditional ghost stories where the supernatural makes itself known, the strange feeling often leaves the threat ambiguous. Is it a ghost? A premonition? A mental breakdown? The character, and by extension, the audience, is left grasping at half-formed truths. The empty passenger seat shouldn't feel significant, but it does. The reflection in the window almost looks like someone standing behind you. The mind races to fill in the gaps, and what it conjures is often worse than any concrete monster. The slow unraveling. These stories excel in pacing. The strange feeling doesn't strike all at once. It builds like a note held just beyond hearing. The protagonist might try to rationalize it. I'm just tired, it's nothing. But the evidence mounts. A book is misplaced. A voice echoes when no one's there. The air grows colder in one spot, for no reason. By the time the character realizes they're not alone, it's often too late to escape. The horror isn't in the confrontation. It's in the dawning awareness that they were never truly alone in the first place. Themes of isolation and perception. At its heart, The Strange Feeling is a story about the fragility of perception. It asks, how well do we really know our world? The protagonist is often isolated, cut off from others who might dismiss their fears. This isolation magnifies the terror, making the audience wonder, if no one else can see it, does that mean it's not real, or that it's only choosing to show itself to you? The best stories in this vein leave room for doubt, making the reader question whether the threat was supernatural or psychological. Why it lingers. The power of the strange feeling lies in its residue. Long after the story ends, the audience is left with a whisper of disquiet. It taps into the universal fear of the unseen, the idea that something could be watching, waiting, breathing just beyond our awareness. It's the shadow that moves when you aren't looking, the certainty that you've forgotten something important, the chilling sense that the empty passenger seat wasn't always empty. These stories don't just scare us, they haunt us. Because the truth is, we've all felt it. That strange, unshakable feeling that something isn't right. And the most terrifying question of all is, what if we're not imagining it? Would you like to explore how this applies to a specific story, or delve into techniques for writing this kind of slow-burn horror? There is a particular kind of terror that lives in mirrors, not in their polished surfaces, but in what flickers across them when we aren't looking. The glimpse in the mirror is a storytelling archetype that taps into one of humanity's oldest superstitions, that reflective surfaces are thresholds, not just showing us our world, but sometimes another one. It's a narrative device that plays on the fear of what watches us from the edges of our perception, and the horrifying moment when the unseen decides to make itself known. The moment of fractured reality. These stories hinge on a single destabilizing instant, a flicker of movement in the glass that shouldn't be there, a face that isn't yours, a figure standing too close behind you when you know you're alone. The power lies in the glimpse, not a full reveal, but a split-second breach in normality that leaves the character and the audience questioning whether they truly saw it at all. The horror isn't in the monster clearly seen, it's in the almost, the maybe, the lingering doubt that worms its way under the skin. Mirrors as liminal spaces. Throughout folklore and myth, mirrors have always been more than objects. They're doorways, traps, or even sentient observers. In these stories, the mirror doesn't just reflect, it reveals. It shows the dead, the hidden, or the true face of the person looking into it. Sometimes it even shows what's coming, a premonition of death, a past crime, or a self the protagonist doesn't want to acknowledge. The act of looking becomes dangerous because once you see, you can't unsee. And worse, sometimes whatever's on the other side sees you back. The slow creep of paranoia. After the first glimpse, the story tightens like a noose. The protagonist begins to avoid mirrors or stares too long, searching for confirmation. They start questioning their sanity. Was it a trick of the light? A hallucination? But then it happens again. The reflection blinks when they don't. A shadow moves independently. The face staring back isn't quite theirs anymore. The terror builds not from sudden shocks, but from the slow erosion of certainty. The mirror is no longer a neutral object. It's a foe, an accomplice, a silent witness to something terrible. The twist. What the mirror shows. The best versions of this trope don't just rely on jump scares. They use the mirror to expose deeper horrors. Maybe it reveals a character's hidden guilt, showing them the ghost of someone they wronged. Maybe it displays their future corpse, confirming their impending death. Or perhaps it's something more existential, proof that the protagonist has been dead all along, or that they're trapped in a world that isn't real. The mirror doesn't lie, but its truth is often worse than any illusion. Why it terrifies us. At its core, the glimpse in the mirror preys on a fundamental human fear, that the world is not as solid as it seems. Mirrors are supposed to show us reality, but what if they don't? What if they show us something else, something that was always there, just waiting for us to notice? It's the fear of being watched from the edges of our vision, of realizing too late that we were never alone. And the most chilling question of all, if something can step out of the mirror, what's to stop it from stepping into our world? This story type lingers because it takes an everyday object, something we interact with constantly, and twists it into something alien and threatening. After reading it, you'll pause before turning on the bathroom light. You'll hesitate before glancing into a darkened mirror. And for just a second, you'll wonder, what if, this time, I'm not alone when I look? Would you like to explore famous examples of this trope, or discuss how to write a scene like this for maximum unease? There is a moment in certain stories where the ground gives way beneath the protagonist's feet, not from some external horror, but from a memory tearing through the fragile surface of denial. The accident, flashback, reveal, is a narrative detonation, a delayed confrontation with a truth too terrible to face. It's not just a plot twist, it's an emotional earthquake, reshaping everything we thought we knew about the story, and the character living it. The weight of repressed truth. These stories thrive on the quiet before the storm. The protagonist moves through their world with a sense of unease they can't name, haunted by gaps in memory, fleeting images of screeching metal, broken glass, or a voice screaming a name they can no longer remember. The audience feels this tension too, sensing that something is missing, that the story being told is only half the truth. The accident isn't just a tragic event, it's a psychological landmine, buried deep to avoid the pain of stepping on it, until, inevitably, it explodes. The trigger. When the mind can't hide anymore. The reveal never comes at random. It's provoked. A song on the radio, a smell of gasoline, an empty passenger seat that shouldn't be empty. In that moment, the dam breaks. The flashback isn't a neat cinematic replay. It's visceral and fractured, more sensation than narrative. The taste of blood, the echo of a laugh cut short, the way the steering wheel jerked under their hands. These fragments rush in like floodwater, and suddenly, the protagonist, and the audience, understands. Oh God, it wasn't just me in that car. The aftermath, living in the wreckage. The true horror of this trope isn't the crash itself, it's what comes after. The realization that they've been living in a fugue state, that their mind has been shielding them from an unbearable truth. Maybe they've been talking to someone who died that night. Maybe they've been blaming themselves for surviving. The accident isn't over. It's been happening on a loop inside their skull, waiting for them to finally see it. And now that they have, there's no going back to ignorance. Why it resonates. The universal fear of facing the unfaceable. At its core, the accident flashback reveal works because it mirrors our own psychological defenses. Who hasn't wished they could forget a painful moment? Who hasn't feared what might surface if they looked too closely at their own past? The trope forces us to ask, what truths am I avoiding? And more chillingly, what if my mind is hiding something from me? It's a story about the cost of survival, not just physical, but emotional. The protagonist didn't just walk away from the wreck. They left a piece of themselves there, and the flashback is the moment they finally go back to retrieve it. The price? Remembering, truly knowing, and in that knowing, finding a way to live with what can't be undone. This narrative device lingers in the bones because it's not about ghosts. It's about the ghosts we make, the ones we bury in our own minds. And like all buried things, they don't stay underground forever. Would you like to explore how this trope differs across genres, e.g., horror versus psychological drama, or analyze a specific story where this reveal reshapes the entire narrative? There comes a moment in certain stories when the world tilts on its axis, not with a crash, but with a whisper. The ghostly realization is that chilling instant when a character understands, with dawning horror, that they have not been alone. That the empty house was never empty. That the voice they've been hearing wasn't memory or madness, but something, someone else entirely. This is not a jump scare. It's a slow, sinking comprehension that the rules of life and death do not apply here. The unseen made visible. The power of this moment lies in its revelation. It begins with small, dismissible things. A cold spot in a hallway, a photograph that's been moved, a sigh in the dark that could almost be the wind. The protagonist rationalizes because to do otherwise would unravel them. But then comes the shift, the moment when the ghost chooses to be known. Maybe it's a hand on their shoulder when no one is there. Maybe it's a reflection in the mirror that meets their eyes and smiles. Suddenly, the haunting is no longer abstract. It has a face, a name, an intention, the weight of recognition. This realization is never just about fear. It's about reckoning. The ghost is not a random specter. It's a person with unfinished business, a loved one who never said goodbye, a victim demanding justice, a version of the protagonist who never got to live. The horror here is deeply personal, because the ghost is not an invader. It's a part of the story that's been there all along, waiting in the margins. The protagonist's grief, guilt, or denial has kept them from seeing it. Until now. The inversion of reality. What makes the ghostly realization so unsettling is the way it rewrites the story in retrospect. That empty passenger seat, it was never empty. The whispers in the attic, they were words, not drafts. The protagonist's loneliness was an illusion. They've been watched, followed, accompanied. The world they thought they knew is revealed as a fragile veneer, and beneath it lies something older, darker, and far more intimate than they could have imagined. Why it haunts us. This trope lingers because it speaks to our deepest anxieties, not just of the dead, but of being known. The ghost sees what the protagonist has tried to hide, their secrets, their regrets, the things they've buried. There is no running from a specter that lives in your breath, your reflection, your bones. By the time the realization comes, it's already too late. The ghost isn't just there. It has always been there. And the most terrifying question of all? How long has it been waiting for you to notice? Would you like to explore how different cultures frame this moment in folklore, or analyze how writers build tension toward this revelation? There is a special kind of storytelling alchemy in the moment when the ground falls away, when everything you thought you understood about the narrative fractures and the truth reveals itself to be something else entirely. The final twist is not merely a surprise ending. It is an act of narrative sleight of hand that reframes the entire story, forcing you to reconsider every scene, every line of dialogue, every assumption you've made. It's the gasp in the dark, the icy finger down the spine, the realization that the story was playing a game you didn't even know you were part of. The anatomy of a twist. A true twist is more than shock for shock's sake. It is the careful layering of clues, some obvious in hindsight, others so subtle they feel like afterthoughts, that coalesce into a revelation that feels both inevitable and earth-shattering. The best twists don't cheat. They unfold like a flower whose petals were always hiding the rot at its core. Think of the way The Sixth Sense makes you replay every interaction with Cole's mother, or how Fight Club forces you to question the very nature of the narrator's reality. The twist is the key that unlocks the story's true meaning, and once turned, the door can never be shut again. The emotional gut punch. A twist is only as powerful as the emotional weight behind it. It's not enough to reveal that the protagonist was dead all along, the others, or that the kindly neighbor was the killer, Psycho, or that the hero was the villain's unwitting pawn, the usual suspects. What lingers is the feeling, the devastation of realizing you've been mourning a ghost, the horror of recognizing the monster in the mirror, the sickening drop in your stomach when the pieces click into place. The twist is a betrayal, but one that feels right, as if the story was always leading you to this moment of terrible clarity. The aftermath. A story reborn. The magic of a great twist is that it doesn't just change the ending, it changes the story itself. Suddenly, the protagonist's journey takes on new meaning. Their struggles, their relationships, their very identity are recast in a new, often darker light. The twist forces the audience to revisit the narrative, to sift through the debris for the clues they missed. It's a story that demands to be experienced twice, once in innocence, once in knowledge. And in that second reading or viewing, the story becomes something else entirely, a puzzle with the solution now visible, a joke with the punchline revealed, a nightmare you can't wake from. Why we crave the twists resonate because they mirror our deepest fears, that we don't truly know the people we love, that our memories are unreliable, that reality itself is fragile. They tap into the universal dread of being wrong, of realizing too late that the world is not what we believed. A great twist doesn't just surprise, it haunts. It lingers in the back of your mind, whispering that nothing is ever as it seems. And perhaps that's the greatest twist of all, the realization that the story was never about what you thought. It was about you, your assumptions, your blind spots, your willingness to trust the narrative. The twist holds up a mirror, and in its reflection, you see not just the story, but yourself. Would you like to dissect a specific, iconic twist, or explore how to craft one in your own writing? The devil and the delight is in the details. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for more. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next one. Bye for now.